fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight the Indiana Hoosiers defeat Bellarmine in their second exhibition game, 73-62. We will break down the game for you this evening. It wasn't the prettiest of second halves. We'll get into that. Indiana had a stretch in the first half, an 18-0 run where they played really, really well. But after that run ended, it was really kind of ugly there for about 24 minutes, and so we will break that down. We do not have our normal cast of characters tonight, as Ryan is off, and Will is actually he's watching the Bears game tonight, preparing for his Bears post-game show. But we do have Andy Bottoms, and we do have special guest Chronic Hoosier with us. We always enjoy it when Chronic is here to add his insight to the proceedings, and so we will talk with him about this IU game as well. I'm your host, Jared Morris, and we begin tonight with our banner moment, which is that moment in every IU game that makes us think that we're on track to hang the next banner. And tonight, for me, really it was the play of the bench. You know, we talked a lot leading up to the season. What would be the starting lineup? Would Tom Crean go big? Would he go small? And we've seen Max Bielfeldt start these first two games, sending Robert Johnson to the bench. And tonight, we saw in both halves Robert Johnson, along with Colin Hartman, really provide a nice spark for this Indiana team. In fact, if you look at the first half, it was 9-7, kind of a sluggish start. Robert and Colin came in. That began the 18-0 run, as Indiana went on a 9-0 run there in that first sequence with the subs in. And it was in large part because of increased defensive pressure. And maybe that was in part sparked by Tom Crean telling the guys to pick up ball handlers a few steps outside the three-point lane. But there was a different intensity level there, and I think that was really led by Robert, led by Colin, and it filtered down to the entire team. Same thing happened in the second half, where Bellarmine comes out, and they made 3 threes on their first 3 possessions of the second half. They went on a 9-3 run. Really, they cut it to under 10. It was 38-29. Robert Johnson and Hartman come in. Indiana immediately goes on a 10-4 run and pushes that lead out to the point where even sluggish play in the second half wouldn't allow Bellarmine to get it closer than 10. But I really liked that spark from the bench that we saw from those two guys, and I thought it wasn't an offensive spark that they brought, which is a lot of times what you think about when you think of guys coming in off the bench. It was defensive effort that I thought they brought that really, again, filtered down to the entire team, really set Indiana on track to have some really nice sequences. And really, outside of those stretches, Indiana did not play very well tonight. So we know that for this Indiana team to succeed, they're going to have to be able to go 8-9 deep. They're going to need to get solid bench play. And frankly, tonight, I thought Indiana's best units were when those guys were on the floor, coming in off the bench, providing that spark, and ultimately helping Indiana get an easy victory, but not really the kind of comfortable, just blowout victory that you hope for in these exhibition games. But we'll break down why that might have been as we go throughout tonight's show. That's the banner moment. Let's go around the horn now and get some other introductory comments tonight. Andy, we will start with you with your bottoms line on tonight's IU victory.
Yeah, it was. It's kind of tough to pick something. I mean, on the one hand, you look at Yogi and Troy combining for 41 points and 16 rebounds between the two of them, and both had stretches where they played incredibly well. You know, Yogi in particular. Troy had some good hustle plays and had some of those, damn it, Troy moments as well that I think I feel like we talk about each show. So those guys played really well, but in the end, like you, I feel very much the same way that it was I think it felt like once IU got up 20 in the first half, just the interest in the game waned, and then from there, I think everybody, myself included, just kind of felt like, well, you're just waiting on the game to get over. You didn't ever really feel, even though I think Bellarmine may have gotten within 7 at one point in the second half, you didn't ever really feel like the game was going to get away from IU, but you also became pretty clear they weren't really going to, put the foot on the throat and really be able to do some of the things they did in that Ottawa game to pull away even late. So I think overall kind of an uneven performance. You saw flashes on the defensive end, but you also saw flashes of the same things you saw last year. They really struggled in pick-and-roll defense, particularly early in the second half, and just kind of sluggish, I felt like, at times on defense, and some lazy shot selection on the offensive end. So looked good in stretches, felt like when they needed to turn it on, they did, but overall, I guess not one that makes you feel worse about the season, but not necessarily one that makes you feel better either.
Well said. Chronic, your opening thoughts on tonight's game.
It's over. Um, it's over, and everybody's walking home healthy. I think at the end of the day, that's probably my biggest takeaway from it. These exhibition games can always be a mixed bag. You look at what happened to Iowa and St. John's here in the last week. The teams that have guys go down with injuries, I guess we avoided all of those things, so that's a positive. That second half, it still left a really, really bad taste in my mouth. I don't know that I feel a whole lot better about the season having seen that than I did going into it. I thought, first of all, I was happy that Yogi was able to kind of put this thing back out of reach. But at the same time, it was kind of troubling knowing that, going into this year, it was supposed to be the time where he became more of a distributor and got everybody else involved. And, for all the talk of the weapons we had, there was kind of a reversion to last year or even the last couple of years where when the wheels seemed to fall off, he was there to kind of right the ship. And fortunately, he was there. It's just kind of unfortunate that he had to revert back to that role again. Like I said in a tweet before, the D still needs some work. I think they showed some signs of improvement, but they still do have issues on the perimeter. Having a hard time staying in front of guys, getting lost on some of the switches. Thomas Bryant certainly is going to discourage teams from getting into the paint. That's something we've missed. Offensively, it just bothered by the ease with which they settled for the deep ball rather than really trying to work it or drive or, do what Bellarmine was doing to us and break them down on the perimeter. So lots of room to grow. And again, we're healthy and undefeated in the exhibition season, so it could be worse.
It certainly could be. When you look at the individuals who jump out of the box score, I mean, Yogi and Troy both had 20 points. Yogi had 21. Both guys grabbed 8 boards. They did a nice job of, leading this team with production. But let's talk about the offense real quick, which I guess is ironic because we've been so focused on the defense. But, I mean, I think, you put up only 73 points against Bellarmine. And Andy, maybe you can provide some background for us on, Bellarmine. I know they've played a couple of big conference schools here recently. Maybe you sent out some tweets before the game. Maybe you can let us know how what Indiana did tonight compares to what other teams have done against Bellarmine. But, I talked about on the halftime report that Indiana, when they probe the lane, when they get the ball into the lane, shooters come open, when they have the awareness to make the passes, we were getting good looks and making them. And I thought tonight, Chronic, you mentioned this, we settled. I thought we got lazy with our decision making, just passing the ball around the perimeter a lot. I thought Yogi did make some really nice shots. He was a good shot maker tonight, but I don't know that he was the kind of point guard that we know he can be. He made some shots, but again, you'd like to see a little bit more distributing, a little bit more not just settling for some of those deep outside shots, because that's what's going to help this offense be the top 5 offense that we know that it can be. And tonight we didn't see that. Again, it's an exhibition game, plenty of time to work out the kinks, and you got new faces to put in there and work out. So we don't want to overreact, but decisions and some of these things, they become habits, and the exhibition season quickly turns into the regular season, which becomes Maui, which becomes big games. And so you don't want to see any of these kind of poor, lazy decisions turn into habits that keep this team from reaching their potential. And I thought that's what we saw tonight, and hopefully that's something on Friday night that we don't see. Andy, I'd love to know your thoughts on the offense, and just, is Bellarmine so good on defense that, it's kind of reasonable for what Indiana did tonight? Because the Hoosiers ended up with, what were they, 1.15 points per possession, which in a normal game, not bad. I think we just expected more, and it felt like there were more opportunities out there tonight.
Yeah, I mean, when you look and compare it, they played Louisville, I think, last weekend or early last week, and they played Cincinnati, I believe, over the weekend, maybe on Saturday. It was kind of right in the middle of those two. Louisville was at like 1.0, 1.07, 1.08 points per possession, and Cincinnati was at 122 or 1.22. So right in the middle of that. I mean, as you kind of look down the numbers there, a lot of the numbers are pretty much in the middle. The one area that IU did a lot better than those teams was getting offensive rebounds, and a lot of that was, I mean, at one point toward the end of the first half, IU'd gotten 70% of its misses. They ended up at 47% on the game, so that was the one area that was a pretty big difference. On the positive side, on the negative side, Bellarmine really hadn't turned anybody over all that much. IU was just over 20% based on the turnover rate that I saw, where I was looking, and kind of free throw rate was right in the middle. So, kind of a middling performance, I guess. I know Cincinnati is not typically thought of as a great offensive team. I think they're going to be a little bit better than people think this year, but definitely felt like, to your point about driving the ball, I tweeted earlier in the first half, there was a 3-possession stretch where, and I'm probably getting the order of these wrong, but Robert Johnson drove in, kicked out to Yogi, I believe, for a 3. Yogi drove, got a decent shot, missed it, and Bryant cleaned it up for a layup, and then Hartman drove and I think set up Bryant for a layup as well, or a dunk. And it felt like in those stretches where they made a concerted effort to do that, they did a nice job and got themselves some really good shots. And there were other stretches where they were content to just run that godforsaken dribble, weave, handoff around the perimeter. I nearly tweeted out at one point that it would be over my dead body that I would teach my daughter's basketball team that I coach to do that at any point during my life. So, I just thought it was kind of laziness. I think a number of people mentioned it. I think you might have tweeted something out at one point. I know a couple of the other beat reporters and things like that talked about just settling. And I thought even to start the game that happened. Bielfeldt took one early. He took another one later. A couple of the ones that Troy took. The one he really took in rhythm and didn't just kind of take as I guess I'll shoot was the one that went in. But the other couple he took just seemed forced and didn't come close to going in. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. I don't know if that's you kind of playing a team you feel like you can beat and it doesn't matter. You'd like to think that mentality isn't there at this point, but I guess maybe that's what I'm telling myself, because I definitely thought some of the shot selection wasn't good, especially when it was pretty obvious as they did drive the ball that they were getting much better shots.
Yeah, Chronic, are you with us still? All right, so...
No, I'm here now. I'm sorry about that. I was slow on the mute.
Okay, you are good. All
Actually,
right, so...
that was the sound of me pouring my first cocktail of the season.
Already, huh?
We've officially reached that point.
We have officially started. Okay, well, since you're already drinking, let me ask you this. Let's talk about James Blackman Jr. real quick, because he played really well, I thought, Indiana's first exhibition game. 15 points, 6 assists. It was a really solid night from him. Any concerns about his shot being off rhythm seemed to not be there. Tonight, James, 2 points. He did have a few nice rebounds, finished with 4 rebounds, 3 turnovers, 3 personal fouls, 1 of 5 from the field, basically a non-factor. And, I wrote in my notes, it was Indiana pushed the lead out to 50-35. This was after that 10-4 run I mentioned earlier, after Robert Johnson and Colin Hartman came in. And James had gone to the bench in that point, and he came in, and I put in there, how does James respond to his poor offensive night? The very first thing he did when he got in was a turnover on inbounds play. And I don't really recall him doing anything else after that, and he didn't play much after that. Again, exhibition game, we don't want to put too much into it. Any concern about, because we know one of the things with James last year that we saw that was disappointing, because we know what he's capable of, is being really good one game and almost a non-factor the next game. And basically through 2 exhibition games, that's what we've seen. Really good one game, non-factor the next game. Any concern at all about James as we enter the season?
I think my biggest concern is kind of a broader concern other than just him individually. I think it's the overall chemistry issue. He's got a lot of ingredients to get right with this team, and you've got a lot. We've got 4 guys, I guess, who are, projecting or showing up at least on the NBA big boards. So that's always one of those concerns is keeping the egos in check and putting the team ahead of everything else. And just the general unselfishness. I think as far as that goes, he was unselfish enough to kind of shut it down when he realized it just wasn't his night. At the same time, though, too, I think my bigger concern was I didn't see a whole lot of action that was really designed to get him off. It seemed like, and I don't know that there's a lot of action in general across the board, and I think that maybe was, in the larger sense, was even more concerning. It was just a lot of that weave and then guys just settling for the jumper. It didn't seem like there was a lot of concerted effort to run sets and get guys at least jump shots. There were certainly some sets that were designed to get the ball inside, but that struggled as could be expected with a bunch of new pieces and as well as the youth they've got. This team is certainly one that wants to get out on the break. They like to play on the wide open floor. I think you're going to see us struggle when teams get us into the half court. And at least what we've seen so far, they've still got some room to go there. Long term, I don't think James is in bad shape at all. that stroke's eventually going to find the bottom of the net, guaranteed. Water's going to find its level. But I'm curious to see if this is a lingering issue as far as them being able to move the ball around and create looks for guys like James, for guys like Ziesloft. He had some action early where they were able to find him in the corner, but it was when they were penetrating and attacking the paint and then opened up the three-point shot. And without much of that, the shooters weren't going to get a lot of space tonight. So maybe that was just a product of the broader issues with the offense this evening.
Yeah. Andy, your thoughts on Thomas Bryant? I mean, his first game, he gets a double-double tonight, came out and was productive early, but then went through a long stretch there where he didn't register any stat at all. He ended up only playing 16 minutes, and it wasn't foul trouble. He only had 2 fouls. There was possession in the second half. Maybe you guys remember this. He had been sitting on the bench for a little while, came back in, and I think it was his first possession down. He was going to, to try and get his post position, and he just it was almost like he was kind of overdoing it, and he nearly elbowed the Bellarmine defender in the face because he was so kind of demonstrative with his motions, and you could see the look on his face that he was frustrated he didn't get the ball. So a little frustration there, which, look, he's a freshman. You're going to see some of that. What I like from Bryant in a game like this is he struggled, but he kept playing hard. I felt like the effort was still there. But, again, freshman, it seemed like he struggled against a bigger opponent tonight than he played in the first game against Ottawa. He struggled to get post position. Indiana struggled to find him. He wasn't terribly inefficient. He was 3 or 4 from the field, but didn't get, the team didn't create a lot of opportunities for him, and he wasn't able to create a lot for himself. What'd you think of Thomas Bryant's overall game tonight, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I thought kind of what you did. I think his activity level at the beginning was really strong, and almost any time there was a rebound to be had that he was near, he was coming up with it. He had 4 offensive rebounds. I have to think most of those were in the first half. At least 3 of them were. I'm fairly certain. And so, I thought that was a good sign. But I think somebody said he didn't score basically the last 30-ish minutes of the game. I want to say I saw. And so, I don't know. I thought he struggled defensively at the beginning of the half, although Bielfeldt did as well. When the guy Suggs, I think was his name for Bellarmine, came out and hit those 3 threes. I mean, they just did a really bad job on pick and roll, and they would overcommit to the one side and just couldn't get back. And so, I thought he struggled there, and I think IU kind of went small to combat that a little bit, and then it made it hard for him to get back in the game. And then, like you said, once he got back in, was trying to make up for lost time, I think. I like the effort level, as you said, but I do think he really struggled to find, post position. He would kind of like, give it one shot in post, and then, didn't really try to adjust or repost or do anything different. After that, particularly in the first half, and then, part of that is the shot selection we talked about. If guys were going to continue to just, jack up shots, there really wasn't that concerted effort to get him the ball either. So that probably falls a little bit, all around the team for that. But thought it was okay. I think the kind of thing you're going to see from a freshman. I think he's also a guy that, while he played really well in the first game, I don't know that anybody, views him as he's going to come out and score 16, 18 points a night. And so I think from a scoring standpoint, doesn't really worry me. The one defensive rebound is a little, I don't know, concerning is probably too strong a word, but that's, maybe the one stat piece that jumps out that, only one defensive rebound in that. But when I'm looking, I only played 16 minutes as well, so that I'm sure has something to do with it.
Bryant wasn't the only freshman who struggled. I think tonight was, a night to kind of pump the brakes on the freshman hype train a little bit. I thought, we've all seen some really nice flashes from Juwan Morgan, OG Anunoby, and scrimmages through the first exhibition game. I thought, Morgan and Anunoby, they both looked like freshmen tonight too. There were a couple of breakaways where they both had opportunities and couldn't corral a pass, couldn't convert, picked up some quick fouls. So, and look, it's an exhibition game, so you kind of figure the whole team's going to be a little bit off kilter, and with freshmen, that's especially so. And these guys are going to be up and down. They're going to look like freshmen, and they did tonight. And on nights like that, that's really when you need the upperclassmen to step up. And, we kind of mentioned, earlier what Troy did. Chronic, I'd like to get your big picture thoughts on Troy Williams. His, the evolution that we've seen from him, and now what the expectations are for him as a senior. Because to me, we talked about this on our last episode, it takes it up to the next level because he really developed nicely between his freshman and his sophomore year. And clearly not perfect. Too many turnovers. The decision making wasn't there. It was a no-show in some big games. And now we expect him to take that next jump where the decisions get a little bit better, the defensive awareness and intensity gets more consistent, the production gets better even against teams like Michigan State that are going to play him tough. And I look at him through the first two games, and I like overall what I've seen. He's had a couple of stretches in games where he's struggled, but I think he's made up for some of his poor defensive fundamentals by playing really hard, not all the time, but for a lot of the time, and in stretches, he's really sparked the team. Again, 4 turnovers tonight. You're going to get some of that with him, but I think generally his decision-making has been a little bit better earlier in this season. I like what I've seen from him so far. What's your assessment of him so far through 2 exhibition games, and what's your expectation for him as we go into this season?
I think who was it? I think it was Ryan Carrazza with Inside the Hall had said it best, that he's certainly tightened up on a lot of things, but he still very much is going to do Troy things as well. So this is like Troy 3.0, but it's still very much Troy. I think one of the things you see, though, is which Troy you're going to get often depends on where he's at, like what his position is on the floor. When Troy's working on the baseline, is able to play the weak side, it's when Troy's absolutely at his best. He's going to embarrass some NBA guys someday when he can work the baseline like he does. At the same time, when we put him up on the perimeter and expect him to take several dribbles and find his own way into the lane, it's when you revert to the bad Troy. So, I think my biggest concern is with a team that's got this many different components to it, that has the depth across the floor. Let's not put Troy in those positions where he's going to be, where he's not going to be most likely to succeed. Let him play off the ball. Let him play on the baseline. Let the other guys do the movement and find him in space rather than expecting him to get through traffic on his own. He's a sight to behold when he can get out in the open floor, when he can find space to move. It's when he's having to put the ball on the floor at the elbow or even at the top of the key, and that was something that, just based on our depth last year, he was forced into quite a bit, and even his freshman year for that matter. There's a lot of experimentation with him, and I think we've seen enough of a sample set now to realize that's probably not his strongest hand. So, let's see if the system can get him where he's going to be most likely to succeed, and let's work on that. He's an enigma. I mean, he's, looking at the box scores from the night, he and Yogi combined for over half the team's field goal attempts and points, which, it's awesome that those guys have the ability to take over a game like that, and he and Yogi very much do. But with the team with this depth, I would like to see us not to have to rely on that as much. One thing we haven't mentioned so far that I thought was really beneficial for IU tonight was the steadying effect of Robert Johnson. When IU would seem to lose its way and kind of got off balance, his subs coming in always seem to get the ship righted, on both ends of the floor. He seems to play within himself about as well as anybody on the floor that we're going to field.
Hey, that was the banner moment tonight. Robert coming off the bench was the banner moment. No, I agree with you.
I apologize. I missed that. I was responding to employee text when we were going through that, so I was a little distracted.
No, it's cool. And it was my mistake too, because we always joke about how Ryan is the president of the Coach Crean fan club, and Andy may be starting up the Robert Johnson fan club, and I probably stole his thunder with my banner moment. So Andy, your thoughts on Robert Johnson and Colin Hartman and their settling effect on the team when they came in?
Yeah, I mean, I've just, as we've got closer to the season and watched these first couple games, I feel like I've talked about, Robert Johnson quite a bit, but I just think, he's the kind of, to use the cliche term, you probably apply this to both guys, the kind of glue guy who can come in and do a little bit of everything. I thought Johnson showed, knock down some shots, played some really solid defense, is arguably the team's best on-ball defender, and really came in and did some good things on that end of the floor, and really seems to have, like Hartman, a good sense of where he's supposed to be, what he's supposed to be doing, which is not something you can say for some of the other guys as you watch this team play defense. So I just thought he did really well. Came in, did the little things, didn't try to do too much. Only took a couple shots, but he was 3 out of 5 from the floor. Missed a couple threes, but 8 points, 2 assists. and no turnovers in 24 minutes. So again, as we start to think of him as the secondary or at times primary ball handler for the team, I think that's a great sign, given some of the turnover numbers we saw from him last year. And then Hartman, kind of goes to show that you don't have to score to really make an imprint on the game. At least according to what I'm looking at, didn't score. 2 assists, 6 rebounds, 2 of those on the offensive end in 18 minutes, and was a plus 23 if you look at plus minus. So, just made a positive impact, knows where he's supposed to be, knows where other guys are supposed to be, and I thought when they brought him in to kind of settle down the perimeter defense with some of the big guys that Bellarmine had out there, he really did a nice job of stabilizing things and on that end of the floor. So I do think that's, for as much as I probably will complain about some of the lineup changes and shuffling guys in and out, I do think that having those guys come off the bench, if that's how the lineup stays, or even if they don't, just having different combinations and being able to play big or play small and make those kinds of adjustments during the game is going to be important for this team, especially as the young guys might struggle. There's more guys to turn to, I feel like, than there certainly were last year in order to, guys to turn to get some stability out there.
You mentioned not having to take shots or score to contribute, and you look at Hartman and Robert Johnson. Between them, they took 7 shots and they played a combined 42 minutes. Andy, you and I tweeted about this a little bit, and Max Bielfeldt, let's talk about him, because I think we've all been impressed with the impact he's made on the glass, and he did it again tonight, had a couple more offensive rebounds. I'm starting to worry a little bit that he's shooting too much, and I say that he took 6 shots tonight, 2 for 6, playing only 16 minutes, and I thought a few of those shots were kind of forced, where he just kind of took it off 1 or 2 passes and either took a deep jumper or tried a post move, and it's not that we don't want him doing that, and frankly, he did have a nice, shot fake and then took about a 15-footer and made it. I think he got fouled on that play too. You don't want a guy playing tentative. Max obviously can make shots. He's going to have a role, but I will say that I envisioned his role being a little bit more dirty work, helping move the ball on offense, set screens, get other guys open, as opposed to him looking quite so much for his shot. And again, it's not that he's not capable. But Thomas Bryant is probably capable of making threes, but that doesn't mean that him shooting a 3 is the best option. What is a good shot on what is supposed to be a top 5, top 10 offense in the country is a lot different than on an offense that's a top 100 offense. And I wonder, in exhibition, we're not going to make any drastic judgments until we start seeing games. But I think it's something to watch for, because I just feel like sometimes his shots come a little bit outside of what our offense should be doing, and that may be just him getting used to the offense, guys getting used to him. Are you seeing that too? Am I blowing it out of proportion, or do you think he's kind of trying to do a little bit too much right now?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the same thing. The 3 early. I think he took one early in the Ottawa game as well. And I, quite honestly, from having watched him at least a little bit at Michigan, was surprised to see it, because that really was never part of his game there, at least that I can recall having watched. I don't know if statistically, backs up what is in my head about what he can do, but and he was definitely a guy that we talked about at the beginning of the season as like, this is a guy who's just going to come in and play this certain role, and I don't think any of us would have thought his role was that, and so. I definitely think there were times that he seemed to force shots. Even he got one in the post and was kind of off balance and threw it up. But I do think he's a guy who, he does a good job rebounding. Certainly did a good job that first game. I think he had, 6 rebounds against tonight, a couple on the offensive end. So I think those are the things that you definitely like to see. But I do think there's a component of, some of the shot selection pieces, even the baseline jumper he made where he got fouled, it was one of those no, yes type things, where taking the shot, I was like, I think he passed up a 3, then which I was like, oh, good, and they took a dribble, and I was like, okay, and then he pulled it to shoot, and, kind of had that thought, but he makes a shot and gets fouled. So, I mean, I think the good thing is he's showing he can make that shot. I guess it's just, to me, some of the times it was taken wasn't necessary, but, overall, I do agree that on a team that's got the kind of offensive talent that he has, I don't know that I envision him taking some of the shots he has so far, but I think everybody's kind of feeling things out and trying to figure out how to settle into, their roles and different things like that at this point. So it's something to watch, nothing to be too terribly worried about, because I do like what he's done rebounding wise, but I think he fell into some of the same things in terms of perimeter defense as Bryant did, and got himself out of position on at least one of those threes that I can recall. So I think there's work to be done there, which is not any different than anybody else on the team.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Brody Miller of the IDS tweeted from the press conference that Yogi Ferrell admits the offense is still adjusting to working with talented post players, still adjusting, working those guys into the offense, and that'll be a work in progress, I'm sure. So all right, we've got these 2 exhibition games. Indiana comes out with 2 wins, unscathed in terms of injuries. All of that is good. Now we can focus on the season. Chronic, give me your big picture thoughts on this team. And Indiana's a team that seems to be ranked in the around the 15 range. Seth Davis, though, had Indiana I think 7th or 8th, so he's especially bullish on the Hoosiers. People obviously very high on the offense. I think SI.com, their projections had Indiana with the number 1 offense in the country. So we know what Indiana's supposed to be. We know what Indiana needs to do to improve. What's your confidence level as we head into this season about Indiana being able to fulfill and possibly exceed its potential this year?
Oh man, that's
it's a big question.
It's probably no different than what it was at the start before we played these last 2 games. Exhibitions are. It's kind of like when you go to lab and it's ungraded assignments, if you will. They certainly have potential. We've seen glimmers of what this team can do. I got kind of drunk on it there for a second in the first half when they went on that run. I think they went on like a 20-something to nothing run. Mm-hmm. They were able to put some stops together, got out in the break. We're finding, the ball was just moving. And, as has been the case in many a Tom Crean offense, when the ball's able to move, and these guys are able to get out into space, it's something to behold, because they just put their foot down and don't let up. At the end of the day, though, too, we've seen them lose control of that, and then the defense seems to be pinned to the offensive efficiency, and when one goes, the other one always seems to go. So I certainly think he's got the talent. He has the pieces this season. Like I said earlier, I think chemistry is going to be a big part of it. As far as these guys being willing to make the extra pass, I would like to see the offense flowing through the post more. One thing we talk about the post like it's this mythical creature, and even when you have these pieces, without sounding like the old fart here, I still don't think kids today know how to post, even when they have size and superiority. It's still a lost art in today's game. Kids just don't post like they used to, or at least in the traditional sense of post. I think a lot of times you're not so much looking to get a back to the basket score as you are just to pull the defense in and open up space for the rest of your teammates to move in. And they really didn't seem that interested in playing through the post in that sense today. I think Thomas has certainly got some time to get his legs underneath him and kind of figure out the game. It's certainly a big leap for these guys when we forget even with the McDonald's All-Americans. And maybe the exhibition season isn't the best analogy for it, but even once they get into the non-conference regular season, they're forced to deal with guys that are a lot bigger, a lot stronger, a lot more mature than what they've ever faced in their entire lives. And they have to do that now on a night-in, night-out basis at a higher clip than they've ever seen. So there's always going to be some adjustment there. He certainly has the potential to be a game changer for us. I still love the kid's energy. I like his activity underneath the rim, especially in the rebounding side of it. I don't know, man. There's pieces of me that starts to buy into the hype, and then you start breaking it down and watching, and oh man, we're the same thing we've been forever. They have no discipline on defense, and they're too quick to settle for stuff. I don't know that I'm willing to write the team off yet. It's really high ceiling, but the floor is still very much right underneath our feet at this point, as far as showing us what they truly can do and maybe where their potential is going to be at the end of it. And I'm kind of approaching this season with the outlook that it's, for as many veteran pieces as we have, there's so many new pieces on the floor. This is going to be one of those where I'm really looking forward to seeing the arc throughout the season and how they progress and how it comes together, because he's going to have to figure out what the mix is, and if he can, they're going to be able to do something. I do believe that. I'm not going to bet a single dollar on it at this point, but it certainly has the potential to be something special.
Yeah, and we've seen that arc a lot of times peak around mid-January, and of course the hope is that the peak will come more toward the late February, March time frame. That remains to be seen. If that does happen, obviously the guy who will be leading Indiana there is Yogi, and Andy, you bring up a good point in our little side chat that we have going here that we haven't talked to Yogi much given how many points he scored. And that's my fault. I think, I tend in games like this, I tend not to pay that much attention to what a Yogi does in an exhibition game, just because, as a senior, I don't really know how much it's going to tell us about him. But he did do a lot of good things tonight, in terms of scoring the basketball. I think we talked earlier about how we might have liked to see a little bit more from him as a distributor, but he certainly put his shot making on display tonight, being able to make contested threes, being able to make tough twos, being able to get into the lane. And that's what we need to see from him. And if he can put up 21 points, 8 boards, 4 assists, he had a steal, obviously those are going to be numbers that are going to help Indiana a lot. What did you see from Yogi tonight? Was there anything that you kind of took from this performance that was especially notable?
Yeah, it's funny because I tend to feel the same way you do, and I think even on the Ottawa show, I don't think we talked about him a great deal. And we lament the fact that we don't have a lot of guys that have been around long enough to get a good baseline read on what we expect from him, and then the one that we do kind of know, we're like, we'll just take it for granted. He's going to get 16, 18, 20 points a game, and we'll just kind of move on. So it's funny to think of it that way. But I thought he did. I thought he did a good job. I mean, he had 3 turnovers. I don't think. The only one that I think of those that I can remember sticks out as a little bit careless was he had grabbed a rebound and kind of put the ball on the floor in traffic and lost it. But other than that, for as much as he had the ball in his hands playing 33 minutes, I think I'll take a 3 turnover performance from him. So in that regard, I thought did really well and had a really good mix of getting his own shot. He hit some threes off the dribble. He hit some threes off the catch. He ended up hitting 5. Overall for the game. He had a few nice drives to the basket. Some of those didn't necessarily result in him making a shot, but got the defense out of position. And even one of the ones I mentioned earlier, Bryant was able to come in and grab the rebound and get a putback. So things like that he's doing is helping other guys and tied for the team leading rebounds with 8. So I think, showed off a lot of that all-around game. And the one thing I've noticed from him a lot, because so much, maybe just because so much has been made of his leadership and things like that, is when there's a dead ball, somebody gets fouled, he really is calling guys together and at least appears to be being more vocal. I know after one of those 3-pointers in the first half, they took a either there was a timeout or something else, and he was getting on one of the guys about the defense outside. So I do think if there's anything to watch for from him, it's maybe less from a production standpoint and maybe from some of those leadership aspects. And at least through the first couple of games, noticed at least more demonstratively him doing that. I don't know that it's that he wasn't doing that before, but I guess he was doing it in a more adamant way, I guess you could say. So I think that's a positive sign, but overall just thought he played a great game. And as we talked about, it was funny. It's easy to take him for granted, but definitely worth mentioning how he played and really set the tone for a lot of the other guys tonight.
Hey, let me ask you a question. Why do we talk about how Indiana sometimes goes through these stretches where they don't play through the paint and they're not penetrating and they're settling. And that to me, I mean, I agree with you. I think Yogi's being a more vocal leader. Part of the leadership I'd like to see from him is taking the lead on doing that. We have 2 or 3 possessions that aren't great in a row. Instead of him looking to take a shot, look to penetrate and kick. And sometimes he does it, but I feel like he can get into the lane so often and against a lot of opponents so easily, and he doesn't do it consistently. Do you think there's anything to that? I mean, is it the way that he's defended? Is it just that he settles sometimes? Are we being unfair? What do you think?
I don't know that I have a great answer for this, quite honestly. I mean, I think that I don't know if it's just that does it stem back to a couple years ago when it was pretty much he was the offense, and if anything was going to happen, it had to be him, and you kind of get yourself in that mindset and have to over time try to work your way out of it. And even last year, to a certain extent, I mean, there was more scoring on the team, but I think if ever there was a clutch bucket that they needed, then it definitely needed to be him that would get it. So I do think there's an element of having been asked to shoulder the load so much from a scoring perspective, from a big shot perspective. I don't know if that creeps in, but I do think it's something that's worth noting, and I think he was one who was, very much excited about Thomas Bryant and wanting. I think that was a big factor in him coming back. Quite honestly, he's being able to play with a quality big guy and what that might do for the team, and how team achievements can help his perception and overall legacy, I guess. So I think it's an interesting point. I definitely don't have what I think is the right answer or an answer to it, but I guess maybe my theory is just kind of habit at this point based on what he's been asked to do over the last couple of seasons.
Karnik, you mentioned earlier, the potential chemistry landmine that lays before this team and before Coach Crean, with having 4 guys that are on NBA draft boards and 3 guys who really looked into the possibility in the offseason, and keeping everybody happy on the one sense, but also keeping everybody focused on team goals in the other sense. We know that Yogi is going to produce. He is going to put up numbers, and I mean that in a good way. I mean, he, comes to play every single game. He's going to have the ball in his hands. He's going to get his. And again, I don't mean that in a negative way. But how much do you think there is a responsibility on him to also make sure that other guys are getting going? Like, is there a responsibility on him now as a senior to go pick James Blackman Jr. up, understanding what he can do when he's locked into a game, to help get him open shots, to get guys like that going, to really try and get a guy like Thomas Bryant going maybe when he's struggling? Like, how much of that responsibility do you think falls on Yogi's shoulders now that he's a senior, and especially knowing all the talent and all the possibility that exists on this roster, where obviously you can only feed it, one guy on in a single possession, but trying to keep everybody happy and trying to keep everybody engaged in the game?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, this is entirely Yogi's team. This has been one of the biggest, liabilities for this team for a couple of seasons now, is that leadership vacuum and that need for somebody in the locker room to step up and really take charge of it. I mean, I look back at the Big Ten Media Day, and what did we bring up? We brought up Max and Nick and Yogi. That's Yogi's the only player who originally came to this school. It's not something that's been organic within this program since the days of Cody and Jordy and Derek and Vic and all those guys. This is very certainly Yogi's time to shine. And, yes, I think it all falls on him as far as being the general on the floor. I think one of the issues he's faced with, though, too, is so much of this offense is based on on a number of factors, but it's almost like improv. These guys aren't running set plays as much as they're just running, and they're making plays within the game, it seems a lot of times. So, when guys aren't finding their spots, when they're not moving to where they need to be within the flow of the play, not necessarily within a set play that's being drawn up, but finding the spot where Yogi can make the pass, I think that's certainly been a big obstacle with him. The off-the-ball movement is imperative within Tom Crean's system. These guys have got to know where they're supposed to be every time the ball reverses or comes up the court. And we seem to struggle with that at times. I mean, you see guys who sometimes it's just a half stutter step before they make their cut, and that completely makes or breaks the play depending on when they make that break and what space they're moving into. So I mean, yes and no. I mean, he's going to have to find a way. And I think, like you alluded to earlier, sometimes the best thing he can do is just get into the paint, collapse the defense, and then hit the open man when the man's not open from the perimeter, before the play starts. That's been a stalwart of the Tom Crean offense forever, is that drive and kick. And without the drive, you're not going to get those kicks. We end up just passing around the perimeter and taking contested shots. So that's certainly going to be a component to it. I still think we struggle with the post-entry pass. And it's multifaceted there, because it's what angle is the passer approaching the play from, how is the post player sealing off, what's he doing to facilitate it, and I'd like to see more of that this year with the size we have inside now, the increased capability of our big guys. They've got to find a way to be more receptive to taking that post pass so that they can open up the inside-out game. And, I'm not going to lie, our guards still struggle with that element of it too, and that could just be a matter of habit. They haven't had that luxury the last couple of seasons of knowing that that's how the offense is going to have to start. You've got to get it going by getting it down low and then moving around to get the kick out. So it's certainly something to watch develop. I think it's something that Crean's highlighted throughout the preseason. And the other element of that is we've played some really good teams here in the exhibition schedule, but let's not kid ourselves. These are Division II teams. This is like saying, this is the best university team in the country or the best university team in Canada. You're still playing the JV. So, like Troy Williams just said in the press conference, they're a great team and all, but this ain't the Big Ten. This isn't Creighton, or this isn't what we're going to see in Maui here coming up. They don't have a lot of time to figure that out. So, like I said earlier, man, it's going to be an interesting ride to see how it goes.
Yeah, and also Zach Osterman's tweeting right now that a couple of guys were on slight minutes limits tonight, banged up from the weekend. That could explain why Thomas Bryant only played 16 minutes, why Blackman only played 22 minutes. He didn't name names, but I think we can guess.
Along those lines, too, I saw Bryant walking around campus in a boot in the last couple of days. And that's
He's been kind of wearing that off and on, hasn't he?
That seems to be the new status quo within the athletic department. That's kind of like the
boots for everybody.
Literally, when they're not on the floor. I mean, my daughter's apparently Tyra Buss is now one of her associate gym teachers in third grade gym class. Yeah, and she was all freaked out. No, it's super awesome. I mean, God, teach that girl how to shoot, please. But she's been showing up to gym class in this boot every week, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, Tyra broke her leg." I'm like, "What do you mean? Is she in a cast?" And she described it. I'm like, "Oh, so this is spreading now. Everybody gets a boot." But
everybody's wearing the boot. All right.
Well, that's the thing though with not in Tyra's case, but Thomas's at least. When you deal with those big guys and the foot issues, I have nightmares about what happened to Greg Oden. When they linger for this long, it's not a good thing. There's just so much force being exerted on it that it can be hard for it to heal once the season kicks in.
Yeah, well, and hopefully it does for Thomas's sake, and obviously he's going to be a big part of the defense. Andy, before we wrap up here, go to some final thoughts and maybe talk briefly about Eastern Illinois. Any thoughts on the defense tonight? I mean, just generally, again, the numbers. I mean, Indiana held Bellarmine to 0.96 points per possession, but they were way down in the first half. I think Bellarmine only was 0.67 or something in the first half, and Bellarmine really was able to light it up some in the second half, and we kind of talked about how it looked like Indiana was just ready for the game to be over, and that probably contributed to some of it. But, outside of the impact that we saw from Robert Johnson and Colin Hartman, any other comments about the defense as a whole?
I mean, it was just, I think it was 0.63 at the half, so I'll need to figure out, how the possessions looked in the second half. But yeah, definitely a pretty stark change. And I thought, the thing you like is at times, particularly in the first half when they were on that run, you had guys that really seemed to take pride in doing well. Troy got really excited about a couple plays, and forced to travel got excited. I think they got a shot clock violation not long after that. And guys, truly seemed to care about playing defense, which is a lot more than I think any of us would say it looked like last year. So, in that regard, I think you had a lot of that. A lot of those kinds of things are positive. I also think at times activity made up for technique in terms of guys kind of reaching. Maybe they poked the ball away, but they really weren't in position. But you see stretches where guys are in a good stance and they're really seem ready to play and intent on doing what they need to do, and then you see other times where it's just kind of a little bit lazy. So I think it's just finding a way to sustain that. I think you've seen improvement. You've seen that they've worked on it. That much is apparent. It's just the consistency and making that be a regular part of the game that they are able to bring to the table. So I think like I said, on the one hand, I think it's good. You can tell they've worked on it. You can tell guys have gotten better. They just have to sustain it for longer periods of time. And like I said, I felt like after they got up 20, it was kind of like, well, defense didn't seem that interesting anymore, and it was just a lot of going through the motions at that point. And the other thing that was key to that was the defensive rebounding early on. Talked about how I don't think Bellarmine got an offensive rebound until about 4 minutes left in the half. And obviously you can't expect to do that, and part of that's based on the competition and the athleticism and length and all those kinds of things. But if you're able to do those things, force as many missed shots as they did, and not give up any second chances or really limit those, I think that's a big part of defense. And again, something that can maybe make up for some of the things that this team may not get as good as we would like them to be from a technique and that kind of standpoint, that they can make up for a little bit of that with solid rebounding. So that was some positives, some negatives, not all that different from the first game. So continues to be a work in progress on that end of the floor.
Hey, by the way, what level of pressure are you feeling entering the season number 1 on the bracket matrix rankings of the top bracketologists in the world?
Maybe less if you would stop tweeting about it. I don't know. There's a lot of times to
I'm not going to stop tweeting about it.
Whenever I come
my final thought too.
Although the reality is that if the worst happens, I really need to try to capitalize off of it as much as possible now. So in that regard, I guess keep doing what you're doing. But no, I don't. I've got my daughter's third and fourth grade basketball team to coach. I have more important things to concern myself with in the short term before the holidays, and then once our season is over, then I can shift a more dedicated focus to bracketology.
It sounds like Calipari pointing to the draft.
Don't. How dare you? How dare you comparing him? I'm the only other one that shows up. Everybody else has got a reason, and then you make a Calipari comparison. How dare you?
Sorry.
You need me to cover for you on Friday too, and this is how you repay me.
Strike that from the record. I apologize. Hey, okay, but speaking of that, I mean, the reason why you're number 1 and why you do so well is because you know a little bit about every team, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I assume you know something about Eastern Illinois. Like, what kind of challenge, if any, does Eastern Illinois present, and more importantly, how do they compare to these 2 exhibition opponents Indiana's played?
So to be perfectly honest, I don't know a great deal. I have been kind of doing some stuff for preseason bracketology, and part of that has been just trying to figure out where a lot of the preseason, either publications or the media days or pretty much anything I can get my hands on, where they rate some of these teams within their conference. So Eastern Illinois is in the Ohio Valley, which I think IU plays 3 Ohio Valley teams this year, which is a step up from, I think, the SWAC or maybe the Southland that we dominated last year. So they're kind of middle of it's split into 2 divisions, so it's a little bit hard to tell. So they're middle of the pack in one of the divisions. I would guess not really a serious threat to challenge for the win in that particular division. So kind of a middling team from a decent conference. I think I had looked up at some point. I'll see if this is in these notes. I'll see I did. I kept this. At least something I had looked up a while ago. They returned their top 3 scorers, but they did lose 5 guys who played at least 10 minutes a game. So for what it's worth, there is some turnover. They have maybe some of their top-end guys, but trying to weave in some new pieces. I would, certainly not assume they're going to be a huge challenge for IU as things go, but maybe a little bit better than some of the season opening teams we've played over the last few years, like the Chicago States, and I forget some of the other teams of the world. But should definitely be a winnable game at home. Pomeroy there ranked 267, so should be pretty. Hopefully a comfortable win. Pomeroy predicting an 22-point win for IU on Friday.
Perhaps some Priller time in that one?
Perhaps. I know the crowd went home disappointed from the lack of Priller time tonight. There was chanting in the whole 9 yards. Apparently a 10-point lead with a minute left. Not quite enough margin to bring him in.
That's what happens when you let Bellarmine outscore you by 4 in the second half. All right, let's
right.
wrap things up.
They stole something from all of us tonight is really what the problem is.
They did. All right, let's go to some final thoughts and wrap this up. Chronic, thank you again for joining us tonight. Let's get your final thought first.
Well, thanks for having me again tonight.
Always.
Here's the thing, man. I've already got 1 IU football in my life. I don't need another one. I really can't handle this. So to have a really prolific offense and a defense that's going to undermine everything you're trying to accomplish, I can't do that with 2 teams, especially not concurrently. So just don't be IU football. Don't be that team that plays defense so inefficiently that it costs you dearly in the end. And I'm not totally done with IU football yet. I'll never be. That's the fate I've been handed. But God, if it doesn't hurt. I mean, so many nights I've found myself in the pain cave here in recent Saturdays. The scary thing is this team has so many similarities to the IU football. Um, they have the potential to get over the hump. And in this case, the hump's certainly a lot higher for IU. But they still have the same liabilities. They still have a lot of inexperience. They still have a lot of defensive liabilities. They still have a lot of inconsistencies and just some head scratchers on offense. And granted, like we said earlier, we're 2 games into an exhibition season, so everything's got to be taken with a grain of salt. But unlike years past, this season's going to jump on us a lot quicker than normal. So.
Mm-hmm. And if we blow a 25-point second-half lead to Rutgers, we're not doing a show. We're just going to let 60 minutes of blank air go.
Well, I'm not even sure what's going to happen if the basketball does that equivalent. I may delete everything and just go away for a couple of years. The best I can say to everybody is let's just hold on and look for growth game to game. There's going to be some setbacks at times, but, the overall arc of the season should be upward, I would assume. This team has a ton of potential. I don't want to talk about what happens if not, but I think it's on everybody's mind within the building. It's on everybody's mind that's watching the games. Along the IU football lines, I know we're going to get a lot further with some support than we will with a bunch of negativity. I'm doing my best. I'm trying really hard. So let's just hope that it does what we think it can do, and hopefully we'll all be smiling come March.
Absolutely. Mr. Bottoms, your final thoughts.
Well, I think the good news is we saw some good things over the course of these couple games. We saw some improvement defensively, not maybe as sustained as people would like, but we saw some improvement. Got a good look at the new guys, let them get some experience, and nobody got hurt. Quite honestly, I think sometimes in the exhibition season, that's all you can ask for. Yeah, maybe it'd be great to go out and beat everybody by 40, but I don't know that that's probably what the most important thing is at this stage of the game. So we've got a baseline, at least a little bit of an idea of what we can expect from this team, and then we just need to figure out where it goes from here. I think, like Chronic said, with so many new pieces, I don't want to say there's nowhere to go but up, but I think you're going to see you should see those improvements, game to game as these guys get more used to playing with each other in a game environment and in some of these game situations. And so, I think you saw enough to whet your appetite to get excited about what this team could become. And I think we just need to see them build on that with particularly these couple games before they get to Maui. And I think that's going to be a really good trip for them. Wake Forest is not a pushover by any means. Vanderbilt, I think, is a potentially underrated team coming into the season. I think that'll be a really good test with a really quality big guy. And then if they get to the final, they might see Kansas. So I think we'll know a lot more about this team by the time we get to after Thanksgiving, and then we'll go from there. But some positive things to start. I don't know that I feel like all my questions are answered. I don't necessarily feel significantly better or worse about the team, and kind of status quo for me at this point with where things are, and we'll go from there with another show on Friday.
Yes, we will. The Hoosiers win by 11. Andy, you said it right. I mean, you get out of exhibition season, no injuries. Now we're ready to see what this team has in the regular season, and I think you look at a game like tonight, I think this team is going to go as far as Yogi and Troy lead it. I mean, they are the 2 most experienced players on the roster. We know this is a deeper roster that could go 8, 9, possibly even 10 deep, depending on how Juwan Morgan and OG Anunoby progress. But, even a guy like Robert Johnson is a sophomore. A guy like James Blackman Jr., a sophomore. Max Bielfeldt, it's his first year in the system. Nick Zeisloff, it's only his second year in the system. Thomas Bryant, a freshman. So there are still a lot of new pieces working in, which means that the 2 guys who have been around the longest, Yogi and Troy, are going to have to be consistent. And it means that there are going to be nights when some of the other guys, don't step up, aren't quite locked in, and that's what happened tonight. Thomas Bryant, not a great game. James Blackman Jr., not a great game. Some of the other guys didn't do a whole lot. And Yogi and Troy, were able to produce, not just put up numbers in the box score, but, play with energy and do their best to lead the team. And I think that to me is a good sign from tonight to move forward with, because we've talked so much about leadership, last season, in the off season, coming into this season, and this team is going to go as far as its leaders take it, and that's Tom Crean, that's Yogi Ferrell, and that is Troy Williams. And so we're going to see. We don't know anything from the exhibition season, but I do like that on a night like tonight, when it was hard for a lot of guys to get into a rhythm, the bench stepped up with Robert Johnson and Colin Hartman, and then Yogi Ferrell and Troy Williams did the rest. And we're going to need that from those two guys throughout the year. And so hopefully what they did tonight is a sign of things to come, and we end up on the higher side of Chronic's potential outcomes for the season and not anywhere near that lower side. But we'll see. That's the fun part of a basketball season, is just watching it unfold game after game after game, watch the story be written. Hopefully this is a story with a happy ending, unlike some of the recent IU basketball stories that we've watched. Well, thank you all very much for being here live. Thank you for listening on the podcast. If you have not yet joined our email list, I encourage you to do so. We have over 1,300 IU fans just like yourself who are on that list. They get our post-game analysis emails, link roundups, some of the other emails that we send out. We only shoot emails when we have something really pertinent to say. So go to assemblycall.com/subscribe. Get on that email list, and we look forward to seeing you on our next show, which will be Friday after the Eastern Illinois game. I am unlikely to be able to attend that game, so Andy will be your leader and guide you through the whole process. I think Ryan will be there. I think Will be there, so they will have a wonderful show without me. Hopefully it is after a victorious 20-plus point win where Tim Priller gets in and makes all the fans happy, because that's what we would all like to see. All right, everybody. We will talk to you all soon. Thanks for being here, and go Hoosiers.